Hello, Arnaud here from Connection Pathways and the Natural Families Network. Been a deep nature connection mentor, facilitator for about 20 years now. Been mentored by Jon Young in the arts of holistic tracking, mentoring, cultural repair, and also recently became an Evolved Nest ambassador to support the beautiful work of Darshan Arvez to be manifested into the world. And I wanted to talk today about nature connection for babies. Often, when we talk about the nature connection journey, we talk a lot about kids, like the young kids that are at the exploratory age. And I've been teaching adults for a long time to reclaim that birthright. But we often, and then when we think about babies, and a lot of what they need, they get through their mother. My wife Kristyna talks about in pre and perinatal psychology the importance of the mother-baby dyad, and that is so important, and it's like an essential thing to support, and it's really supported through the teachings of the Evolved Nest, and it comes very clear, with that Evolved Nest when we look at our species, the way we evolved biologically, and the way a lot of the other mammals and birds and different species evolved to take care of their young, right? So that's really obvious, and of course that takes us back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. And now in this modern context, most of us don't live in nature. So nature connection is actually super important at all ages and stages of life. And so what does it look like for babies? And one of the things that I love about this too is that so many of the things that the babies need to thrive come through the mother. And of course, as fathers, we can support our partners, the mothers, to be able to provide that. But there's another role that we can play too, and of course that can be played by both parents, but it's a role that we can really be important in too as fathers, is bringing that connection to nature. And so I want to talk to you about that today through some stories of how I did that with my son. At the time of this video now, he's 5.5, but I'll talk about mostly in arms stage, and then some of the stories will kind of spill into just after walking age, when actually some of these will illustrate sort of the results of what we did before. And I kind of got like 4 really important things before I get into the stories that all these stories are going to be illustrating. And so it's really simple, so you don't need to be deep nature connection mentor with 20 years experience to do this. What really is important is that we make nature relevant in as many aspects of our lives as possible, through role modeling. So all of it is about role modeling. Our children are watching us, even when they're little tiny babies, they're watching, and they're looking to us for cues as to what's important and how to be in the world. And then we can activate their senses as much as possible. So like engaging their senses with as many interactions to as many beings and elements of the natural world as possible, that will just really immerse them in the experience of being connected to the earth and the world around them. And one of these powerful senses that not everybody necessarily always recognizes as a sense is imitation. Yeah, so we can really leverage that as a powerful connection tool in all of our lives too. I use it with adults all the time. Of course, kids love to do that too. All right, so the story starts basically not too long after my son was born. One of the first instincts I had was to take him outside and introduce him to the 4 directions and to cedar trees. So I just took him out, and one of the things that I had the instinct to do too is to just talk to him like he was a whole being. So in my worldview, the 4 directions are our allies and our friends. And so I was telling him about that. And I was telling him about the cedar trees and all the gifts that they bring that were just outside the yurt that we were living in and he was born in. So this is one little short stories, one of the little short stories. And another one, there was this tree frog and this yurt. The way you open the windows from the outside is you roll them up so the canvas would roll up and that would leave a screen, or you could put a plastic window on top for the winter so you could still have light but the rain wouldn't come in. And this Pacific tree frog, beautiful little tiny frog with a nice little marking here on the side of its eye, would make its way inside the roll of the canvas from the window, and so we would hear and we would know the frog was in there. And sometimes we would find it on the deck around the yurt. And this is one of the first animals my son learned to imitate me. It's still, I don't even know, maybe he was just walking, but he started making that sound. He actually taught me how to imitate it because I used to imitate it in a different way, but I thought this was more accurate. So I adopted it. But one of the first things, I was like, oh, I really want him to meet this being that lives, right. He lives with us, really. He lived in the yurt, in the window. And so, he was still so small that I could hold him, with his head on my hand and his body on my forearm and his legs and arms dangling. And so I brought him to meet this frog, eye to eye, maybe, like this close. And I still have a picture of that, of him watching the frog, and I could tell there was a connection forming between the two of them, and it's still to this day, like he imitates that frog, and has a really deep connection to the tree frogs. Yeah, and then the other, that sense of smell is so powerful. I know that for me, like crushing the conifer needles, especially this one that we have here called grand fir. It's got this smell of oranges, and just as soon as I smell that, I could be feeling, having a terrible day, and then I'll crush some fir needles, grand fir, and smell it, and it just like completely changes my state of mind. And so that's one of the things, I would crush those needles, have them smell them often too, and all these other things we would smell. I would just bring these smells to him when he was, in my arms or in my wife's arms, and we would, just bring all these smells from our environment, from the natural world, for him to experience. And one day this came, and a lot of people, if you're listening to this, you probably have used this term, or at least feel that there's resonance with that, with saying Mother Earth, and this is a common reference around the world among indigenous people that are deeply connected to the earth, to see the earth as our mother, as human beings, and for the other animals and plants and all the beings that live here. And because we had really been thinking about like how, our son, my wife, his mother, was like the whole world at this time. He was probably like maybe, I can't remember now the numbers, but maybe 3-4 months. I don't know. He was just starting. Basically, all he could say, his only word was mama at that point. And what I did is, and of course, mama's his whole world, everything, if we don't have mama, like the world is gone, and yeah, I think you all know what I mean. And so I took him on this beautiful summer day, and we went down to the ground. It was the grassy ground beneath those same 3 cedars where I had introduced him to the cedars in the 4 directions. And we went down onto the ground, and I think he was crawling at that point, maybe, or just starting. And no, he must have been crawling. Sorry, I'm getting all my timelines mixed up already. And I just went down on the ground, and I patted the earth, and I said, "Mama." And then he went down, and And he looked at me and he did the same. And he said, Mama. I was like, I could tell, like, he just really understood at that. He's like, oh yeah, this is my mama too, Mama Earth. And that was just something I wanted everybody to know, that you could do that. And that connection is one of the most important things that a human being can have, our connection to our Mother Earth. And that it can start so early and that they can feel it like that because, oh, Mama's my mother. She's everything. And then Mama Earth is also my mother. She's everything. Um, yeah, I really imagine the future, if we all began our lives like this. The other thing that was really beautiful in these connections, my mother wanted to make these banners. She's an artist and she wanted to make something for Nolan. And we decided on these banners that would go all around the yurt that would have all the mammals of Southwest BC where we live. So she went on to make that. And by the way, this was really cool, like multi-generational learning because my mom also ended up learning so much about the animals in the process and really enjoyed it. And we hung them. And what we did is I would have Nolan on my head, not my head, on my shoulders. And he'd just be like his head past my head. And we would go around to all the animals and I would like do some kind of imitation or for Coyote, there was a song. But I would start to like just kind of embody that animal and move with it. And he would just feel it. And he would, and then, later on when he was walking and trotting, we went around and like we would trot around the yurt. I'd be like a coyote and then he would follow me and imitate. And so we brought that animal in imitation in really, really soon. Even before he could walk though, he was like part of my imitation. And I would make that a routine to go around to the animals and he loved it. He would point to them and ask for it. And then I was talking about earlier about making nature relevant. One of the things that Kristyna and I did was always, we were always, because that's what we do. We're passionate about bird language too. And so we were always listening to the bird alarm, the cat's coming, or, they all went quiet. I wonder if there was a hawk around. Oh, there's the flicker up there doing its clear call and it's looking this way. So I wonder the hawk must be over there somewhere. We were always doing that and like noticing things on the land, on the water. And, I see that a lot too, people that don't necessarily know about these things. They're, putting out planes to their kids or something like these obvious things. But so the kids kind of get pattered on the planes. And I've seen this like over and over so much, like, that these kids, it's like they don't even know the birds exist. They don't really pay attention because it hasn't been made relevant. So we really made the birds relevant. And to this day, our son recognizes bird alarms and different calls and things like that. And he spots the birds and, even the tiny little Pacific wrens in the low shrubs. He'll be looking for that. It's part of his world. And this is coming now to like favorite stories, and I don't necessarily have like scientific proof for these things, but all the facts add up and these were observed. And so this was really cool. In holistic tracking, we bring in intuition a lot, intuitive tracking. And this was at a time where I was focusing a lot on my tracking studies as well, like furthering my tracking while he was a baby, and I was doing a lot of pretty intensive exercises like being on the ground with one track in the forest litter for 45 minutes and sketching it in a large format to fit on a whole sheet of paper, drawing every little broken needle and broken twig, and asking a lot of questions about the animals and really learning about the lives of the animals around me in a deep way and getting to know some of the individuals. So it was really always part of my world. Therefore, it was part of his world. Even, he'd be in a carrier with me, and I'd be tracking an animal. Like that happened a lot. So we would really get this kind of this medicine from it. Like one time we were in the mountains in the snow. He was, I think, 4 months at that point, and he got to, I was like, oh, you need to feel this, because we were tracking this lone wolf that had been on the trail of different areas where there was a lot of snowshoe hares. And then so at this one point he was following a logging road and went up a bank into the forest, and where the wolf had went up the hill, there was a big hole in the snow, and I said, okay, this is where a wolf was, and I kind of just brought him into the imprint of the wolf's body. We did a lot of stuff like that. So one day, we're just near the yurt again. Most of this stuff is near home, and we spot these two black-tailed deers, and the deer here, these blacktails, they have a particular gait when they get spooked, which leave 4 tracks like a box in the snow, and they're 4 tracks much further, again, like sometimes as far as 10 feet, which we call a pronk. They jump with 4 feet at the same time when they kind of go in this confusing pattern to confuse the predators. As soon as they disappear into the brush, then they sneak away. And so we got to a deer, and he looked at it, and now he's a little bit bigger. He was just walking. He's probably, just over 1, maybe 1.5. And that's the first time he saw that. And it was right on a deer trail through into the forest. And as soon as I saw it, my instinct was I jumped onto the trail, and I imitated the pronk, just standing on my feet, but I was jumping like it was jumping. And then I turned back around and watched him, and he didn't even know how to jump yet. He had just been walking, but his way to imitate was he would kind of go like this and jump, right? So that was like, oh, okay, that's like the feeling of the deer, Okay, so a couple days later, we're walking along our quiet road, and there's gravel on the edge, and I'm not really looking down. We're just walking along, all 3 of us, and he starts going like this. All of a sudden, he's looking at the ground. Or he doesn't even, I don't even know if he's looking at the ground, but he just starts going like this. I was like, oh, deer, hey? And then I look around, I thought maybe he saw one, and I look around, I'll see a deer. And then I look down, and remember, I'd been doing these exercises staring at tracks, so I was practicing to see, really hard to see tracks. So I had to really go down really close to the ground, look at the gravel, and I started making the faint outlines of deer tracks right there. So here again, no scientific proof, but the way I interpreted it is he felt the deer, and he started going like this, which was his embodiment of deer. Another thing he grew up with was, in the yurt, we would hear everything. So there was, we would hear the raven wings flying over, and we even would, we found a way to imitate it in the bathtub with a funnel. We would like push the funnel down, and the air coming out would go, and it sounded exactly like the raven wings. And we would hear the owls, barred owls, great horned owls, we'd hear the woo, 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 and woo, woo, woo. That was like a really common sound and a common feeling, and we would see them. I remember one night where the great horned owls were right around the yurt. It was so cool, And we were visiting his grandmother, who lived on a ferry away, actually in the city, in the suburb. And he was he was tired that day. I wasn't there, actually. Only my wife and him and his grandma was there. And my wife was pushing him in the stroller. And so his imitation of the barred owl, at that point he would just go, woo, woo, woo. But he made basically the same sound for a dog, like woo, woo, woo. And so he does that out of the blue. He just goes woo, woo. And so first my wife was like, oh, is there a dog? And then she looks up, and up on one of the trees there was a barred owl. And then another time he had that was less kind of like mystical feeling in that way, like of intuition, but it was still a connection. There was a he had been watching woodpeckers, and he was still really little, like just over one, and there was all these woodpecker holes in the fallen log, and he went up to it and went like this. So yeah, that imitation especially super powerful, but really just activating the senses. In all those stories, you see that, engaging the senses, building relationships to all these different beings, imitating, making nature relevant, and role modeling, role modeling, role modeling. He's been, our son was always, around us, tuning into nature, around us, doing ancestral skills, living outside, spending a lot of time outside, and sharing nature stories, and now as he learned to talk and all that, and then he became part of sharing the stories too. um and also we you know that I talk a lot about like species and beings, and also elements, like the water and the fire. We spent a lot of time on the fire, and before he could even really talk, he was tending fires, putting logs on the fires. um and that connection really grew too. So the elements, really important connections to make as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video on nature connection for babies. And yeah, again, you can, learn more about my work, our work, at connectionpathways.com. You can learn about the Natural Families Network there. And if you're in Victoria, BC, you can also learn about our local family programs. And we also have some family workshops that we travel around with. So check it out.